Hi, my name is Sonia Hirschauer. I teach in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, and I wanted to talk to you about one of the things I did to increase engagement with the content in my fall 2021 Chem 301B Organic Chemistry course. First, I split students up into small groups called learning communities. And within their group, they completed a weekly active learning assignment, which I called ALAs. So I'll show you an example here. Here we have ALA 9, and this is for LC Jalapeno Ranch. That's just the group name. And each ALA was comprised of a practice problem relevant to that week's material. So this week we were learning about enolates, and so the practice problem was about enolates. There were two parts to completing each ALA. There was an individual portion as well as a group portion. So first, students had to post their own answer to the problem, what they think is the correct answer, as well as a video explanation of how they arrived at that answer, why they think their answer is correct, and any issues they ran into or any questions they still had. This was really just an explanation of how they approached the problem, what kinds of things they thought about, what part of the notes they used to help answer this problem. And then second, for the group portion, students had to watch each other's explanations and then work together to decide whose answer or whose explanation they wanted to represent the group answer. Oftentimes, none of the individual answers were 100% correct, but the group was able to use various parts of multiple videos to come up with the correct answer. So students were encouraged to sort of follow like a pattern of saying something positive about somebody's video and then following up with like a question or providing constructive feedback. So you can see here as an example, this student posted their video. This other person replied that the mechanism looks pretty good, but that they had a question about the enolate formation. And this is pretty typical of what the discussions are like, where students are saying, I have something similar, but this part of my answer is different. Or they'll say that we have the same answer, but our explanation is a little bit different. A lot of people ask questions like, I had a hard time with this one aspect of this problem. How did you know to proceed in such a way? And then students are able to say, well, I went back to this part of the notes and you can check out this part. And so people in the group are able to really benefit from the discussion about each person's video. This was an effective strategy to increase engagement with the content because, number one, when students explain how they arrive at an answer, it really helps to solidify their understanding of the material. It's a lot like teaching somebody something, and that is always kind of the best way to make sure that you understand what you're talking about. And then two, hearing each other's explanations can really help illuminate holes in their own understanding. Working together and understanding why certain answers and explanations were correct or incorrect. This is a very, very helpful exercise for students to stay engaged with the content. Students were allowed to discuss each other's videos through the discussion forum, or they were allowed to meet up on Zoom to have more of a face-to-face discussion in real time. I left the discussion up to the students, but I provided feedback to people's individual videos after the deadline had passed. I also provided feedback on what the group decided was the final correct answer. And then I provided my own video explanation of the answer and my thought process for how I answered the question. So the two graded components were the individual video and then the group video. So there was a lot of incentive to make sure that the answer that the group decided upon was really the one they wanted to represent the group, because that grade for that group video would be applied to everybody in the group. Students were also encouraged to engage in a similar exercise to study on their own by picking a practice problem from the practice problem set and then explaining it to a peer. And by doing sort of the weekly ALA, they were able to see how powerful it is to explain thought processes to each other. Student feedback on the ALA was overwhelmingly positive. So comments from students in the SOQs included that the ALAs were applied to encourage collaboration and discussion, that they liked the assignments, especially the ALA. The ALA posts really helps to keep students interactive with each other, as well as making the material better to understand. And that the ALA was very helpful since we get to have our classmates' thoughts on the way that we think. And so I think the ALA were pretty successful in helping students engage with the content in a way that was a little bit different than just a traditional practice problem. Thank you so much for watching.